as I said, welcome. Thank you very much. And I suppose, did you want to just kick it off with just explaining a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Fera Science, please?
Okay. Let me just share my screen just to put
Amazing
context to who we are and where I sit. Delighted to be here, Sarah, and everybody. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate in the hackathon this weekend as a judge. I'm really excited by the prospect of this weekend being one of many in the future, to be honest. I think when we look at the work that we do here at Fera across the ag, the food and the environment space, looking at innovation, both supporting the public sector but also the private sector, and more recently the investment community that is increasingly excited by ag investing. I think this is going to be a really exciting space, one that does need to harness the nature of people who've joined this hackathon over this weekend, and trying to harness that intellectual horsepower to kind of solve some fundamental issues that underpin our food and our agricultural processes and sectors. I'm Damien Malins. I'm the Venturing Projects Director for Fera Science. And hopefully you can all see an overview of our site up in Yorkshire, just outside of York. We are a joint venture between DEFRA here in the UK, the Department for Food and Agriculture here in the UK, and Capita, and Capita being a large-scale outsourcing business which has around 60,000 employees, touching all parts of the UK social infrastructure. And we do a lot of work across a number of areas. And Fera is our scientific research centre. And Fera is a facility that has a pedigree for probably around the last 120 years of delivering research into food production, agricultural developments, and the environment protection. And as this aerial photograph shows, we cover a broad range of services. We do a lot of work with the pesticide, the chemical sector, looking at protecting the environment, whilst also looking to develop new forms of protection for crops and plants which are beneficial to the environment, or at least do less damage to the environment than historically they have done in the past. And we have a whole range of other areas of expertise where we touch on food safety, looking at issues which are caused by pathogens, contaminants, and counterfeiting in the food supply chain, all the way over to an area which I personally am really very enthused by, which is around the bee health. We are the UK Centre for Bee Health, and we have a huge bee e-toxicology centre, as well as a deep expertise in entomology. And whilst that's really exciting around the kind of areas of interest around protecting the health of bees and ensuring the bee populations don't die off globally, but it also allows us to dip our toes into areas which are really exciting around insects and the creation of novel proteins, which are areas of real focus and quite a significant amount of investment globally to create new forms of protein that take the pressure off the rainforests through soy production, as well as the kind of depletion of our oceans of fish. Fish meal is traditionally used to feed fish in farms, and that has a huge pressure on our environment. So we work quite closely with investors who are really interested in turning insects, which are traditionally seen as a pest, and turn those into something which can be farmed at scale and turn those into a source of human protein, but more importantly, protein for animal feed that can be used in poultry, in fish farms, in cattle, as well as in non-ruminants as well. Fera, I mean, we have 350 scientists. We do say we are different, largely because of the people that we have inside our organization. We are a test center. We do a lot of testing for the public sector and the commercial sector. But the fact that we have scientists, we have people who have gone through their PhDs, they've gone through their doctorates, they do a lot of research, applied research in a number of areas. It means that we do have a real interest in innovation and taking science out of universities, out of research centres such as ourselves and trying to find a way of applying those findings and those learnings to the benefit not just of the environment from a protection perspective, but also looking at how can we work with farmers, agriculturalists, and commercial food producers to adapt their food production methods and their approaches to create new products, but also to improve the current products and make them safer, but make them also decarbonize their processes. One phrase that often comes up, how we can help them make more with less and be more efficient and more effective. And that allows us to do a huge amount of work, which we are very proud of. And that all comes down to those individuals that I work with. I'm not a scientist. I have a very privileged position as the venturing director. I work very closely with all of our researchers, trying to look at how do we translate the work that they do on the bench and in the laboratories, in the greenhouses, in the fields, and turn those into innovations and industrial solutions that can help us globally improve our planet. I've got only a few slides to cover off here, but the next slide here really is just I want to pull out something which is something I've seen from just monitoring the interaction across the hackathon in the last day or so is collaboration. You know, one thing which underpins really our mentality is that we can't do it alone. There is so much to be done to attract investment, but also to make a difference. But no institution, no individual can deliver that without reaching out across a very broad community of like-minded individuals. And we at Fera are very similar to that kind of that. We adapt to that mentality and we really do adopt it amongst our core business. And this slide just is a snapshot of all of the wonderful people and organizations that we work with and actively participate, not just on early stage research, but applied research. And as you can see down at the bottom here, you know, into the commercial world where you're taking those learnings and applying them into corporate organizations and into delivery. And we balance that, so we focus on those three areas. And there's now an increasing focus on a fourth area, which is the investment community that is really, really starting to be attracted to AgriTech innovation globally. Those organizations that will traditionally have invested into fintech, into workplace services, into HR solutions, where there's always been a huge body of activity around entrepreneurship, innovation, taking learnings from data management and applying those into improvements in kind of our core business elsewhere. And that effort is now being applied into the agricultural sector. So we are now seeing this community here that we're involved in increasingly attracting in entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors who are new to this sector. And that's really exciting from us, because without those people, without that money, without that enthusiasm, without intellectual horsepower, we won't make those changes that are needed. And Fera's view is that there is a huge need for an agricultural industrial revolution, a fourth industrial revolution, which if it doesn't happen, if we don't change agricultural practices that have been underpinning the way that we farm, the way we produce food, and the way we look after our environment and have done for the last 100 years. If we don't do that, then we will really struggle with the burgeoning population globally. We need to find ways of looking after our land better. We need to find ways of harnessing the land and farming the land to create better quality food and greater volumes of food. I think this weekend I've been working not only just interacting with the hackathon, but also working on a number of initiatives that we Fera are driving around how do we take waste from a number of sectors, run it through insect bioconverters, through other forms of anaerobic digestion processes, novel technologies which are at the forefront and they're really early stage in development, and apply those to create new forms of fertilizer, protein, biofuels, and bioplastics. And one aspect out of food production is we can repurpose waste, we can turn that waste into something productive, and actually we can use it to turn into higher grade, higher value products, such as new forms of bioplastic, which do actively degrade into the environment and actually have a beneficial impact on that environment. So my weekend has been quite busy looking at those kind of projects, which are really fascinating, because actually in all of the projects I touch, I may have those wonderful people at the bottom who have huge pockets and lots of cash to bear and spend on new products. But actually, they alone recognize they need entrepreneurs, innovators, young men and women who are sitting on their own inside a university or in a research center who have a great idea. And in all of my projects, there's always one person like that, if not more. And that really is the driving force about how we make change. And that change is necessary. I think if I drop onto this one, I think this one here in particular highlights, if I get rid of that image over there, we are addressing a whole food system. And that's the whole environment. It helps us manage everything from both protecting the environment, protecting the bees, creating better quality crops, growing those crops more efficiently, using less or fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides to manage those crops. Looking at the tillage processes, looking at the way that which we harness the soils, putting more back into the soils than we take out. And if we don't adapt to those kind of technologies, then we will really struggle. And this is really underpins the whole sense of what we do at Fera, and we are keen to do more. Hence why we are actively looking to work with these kind of hackathons to understand where those good ideas are and what we can do to actually work with those individuals, those organizations, to help them scale up and move forward. And we're not alone. And I've stripped this slide from a number of investor reports, but it's an interesting reflection of the fact that people who are innovative and entrepreneurial should be attracted to the ag and the food tech sector, because there is a real opportunity to build a career here, to actually make a difference, to find funding that can help you scale up your good idea, turn them into demonstrators, into pilot projects, and then scale them into an industrial solution that will fundamentally affect the lives of 7 billion plus people on the planet. Now this kind of money coming into the sector is really, really attractive from the perspective of it being not only focused on their areas of change, but it's also able to take greater risk. Therefore, it's willing to make mistakes, it's willing to learn, and it's then willing to work out how it takes those learnings to grow, develop, and then effectively turn a profit on the back of these great ideas that are coming out of innovators. And in the last few years, since 2017, there has certainly been a huge step up of interest in this sector. And in many ways, the last 6 to 7 months have actually bolstered that. There's been an increasing recognition that there is a weakness in our food, in our agricultural system, not because of the fact that the supermarkets can't get enough food on the shelves at the right time in the right locations, and they can't meet demand, but because actually the supply chains, the global supply chains themselves are very weak. There needs to be more focus on local, regional and national food production and food systems that enable us to deal with the peaks of demand. And that means that more money and more interest and more investment has come into food production and the agricultural technology sector. And in the last 7 months of 2020, we've almost met the same amount of money invested in 2019, and definitely met what went into the sector back in 2017 and 2018. And that really is quite exciting. And we should see over the next year this momentum continuing. These kind of hackathons, the innovation that comes out of this hackathon, hopefully will drive forward a number of initiatives that will be picked up by angel investors and then subsequently by venture capitalists who will help those grow up into what are similar to the vertical farms, the insect farms, the carbon dioxide capture technologies, the food mapping systems, and so on. I think there is one lesson I've learned, and it's something I'd like to impart upon everybody who's attending the hackathon this weekend and those in the future, is there is still a challenge here. And actually, it's a challenge we, as the innovators, need to recognize. Now, we shouldn't assume that our great idea is naturally going to hit and land and be accepted by the farming or the food manufacturing community. Now, there is a real problem where you come up with some great ideas, but those ideas are developed in isolation to the actual need, the need of the market, the need of the individual farmer, the expectation of how they would implement that and turn that into something which creates greater productivity, but also is something which allows them to maintain profitability and enable them to actually deliver their systems without actually compromising them financially or operationally. We see, and this is not just from a Fera perspective, it's from the work that we see globally around the adoption of change, where there is a real, I think innovators, entrepreneurs have a tendency, and I do hold myself to account here, is to overhype the performance, the deliverable capability of a novel piece of technology. You have to do that at times to get people enthused by it. But actually the reality is that it's much harder to deliver at scale. And you've got this hard work to make those systems and those innovations happen. And so you do see this what we call, and I like the name of it, the trough of disillusionment, where people who have adapted a new technology realize it's not going to change the world within a day. It is a hard slog to get that change implemented and scaled up and then repeated. But it can happen. And I'll also add into there, which is the acceptance on how much it costs. I mean, I sat in a number of presentations when members of the alliances around certain farming groups stood up to the audience, to an audience of scientists and innovators and entrepreneurs, and said, please don't come up with a great idea that costs me £500,000 to invest into. I just don't have it. They're not cash rich mostly. They may have capital locked into their land, into their facilities, but they don't have 500 grand lying around. You do need investors behind you who understand that. And you also need to come up with a route whether you're selling a data service or a new form of tillage or a robotic solution or a new protein product, you do need to work out a way of getting that product and that service to market, which is not going to charge a end user an enormous amount of money. You've got to find a way of getting it affordable to the end user. So people who do really want to buy that product because they are keen to make a difference about how they buy and how they implement to the benefit of the environment, but they just can't do it unless it's affordable. So this slide here, I think, is a great reflection of the fact that we do need to keep that in mind. We need to recognize that what we innovate has to be reflection of the market need, and it needs to be affordable. And I say that from personal experience. And this is pretty much my last slide, really. A year ago, I ran an internal hackathon and an innovation around environmental sensing. We at Fera had a crazy idea that we could take metadata, soil science and soil data and other forms of information that we had to hand, as well as publicly available information, and put that in an app, and then we would be able to use that app to help first responders, owners of infrastructure such as Network Rail or Transport Links, those who own huge tracts of land like the Environment Agency, the Forestry Commission and Natural England, as well as the water companies. And if we put all that data together, we could provide them with a real-time information on flood forecasting, localized and enabling those organizations to reach out into the communities to effectively use Twitter to the advantage so they can get feedback from the community. Great idea. We pitched it, we developed it, and this slide highlights the journey that we took it on. We created the user interface, we created the database behind it, and we took it out there. And we took it to the clients on the right-hand side. They said, "This is fantastic, we'd love it, but we just can't afford it," because it was just too expensive, and it didn't help them change significantly what they did day to day. It was a great addition, but it didn't move the dial sufficiently for them to say, "We must have this." This we developed, I think, at the same time as What 3 Words was also hitting the market. And that did make a difference. So I think it's a good comparison between a piece of great ideas from similar kind of perspectives. Ours didn't move the dial forward, whereas the opposite from What 3 Words did. They really did. It made a significant difference because you started to realize the end user could make a significant impact on how they delivered their work, if they were a business, or as a first responder or an emergency server, or as an individual. And they could see why it's worthwhile them paying the price for it. And that price was pitched at the right level. So I think what we have to recognize that we have to keep in mind the end user and the end buyer of a innovation. But I think I'd also end on the point is that we failed. And it is hard work, and it is hard when you fail because you think you have a great idea. We picked ourselves up. And I think everything I've learned in my time as the venturing director is that the highs are really high. When you've done something exceptional, you feel great. But when you fail, and the lows are really hard. But you've got to be able to pick yourself back up and stand up and start again and look at it with a fresh set of eyes saying, I've learned, I now need to move on, and I now need to find a way of making a difference. Because we do need to carry on. If we don't carry on and stop because it's too hard work, then we have a real problem that faces us as a society. So the individuals who are giving up their weekend this weekend, and I'm sure many other weekends, they are doing something which is incredibly important, hard work, and it really is tough at times, particularly when you hit those lows and when you get pushed back by investors, by businesses, or by other developers. You need to be able to pick yourself back up and keep positive and keep pushing. Adoption is and innovation is really essential here, but it's not easy and it's not straightforward. If it was, everybody would be doing it, and we need you to carry on. And I think that was pretty much it, Sarah. All I really wanted to say is to say,
I literally feel like doing this. That was so enlightening. It was absolutely brilliant, and and this is exactly what we needed at this time of the day, because the teams have actually used the morning for ideation. This is where we are getting down to the nuts and bolts, and you've really hit the nail on the head about the end user. And even I feel inspired now. I was sort of lagging a little bit just after lunch, raring to go. So I can't thank you enough for this. And I just feel really inspired by this, and I think it's from your perspective, because we have, as you know, we have a multitude of nationals joining us, and when we've spoken previously, we've both agreed that cross-border collaboration can only do good. It helps to learn from each other. It helps to collaborate. And what we face in the UK, I'm sure, is other nations have either faced and tackled, or they can see that coming up in the future. In terms of the advice for our participants, is there anything in particular that you think from the UK perspective that we are in desperate need of help with within the AgriTech field?
I would actually say the UK is a laggard in innovation around when we compare ourselves not just to our European colleagues, but to our international colleagues from the science sector and from the entrepreneurial sector. When we look into China, we look into Asia, we look into India and Pakistan, and when we look into the Middle East, and certainly when you look into Israel, I mean, there are entrepreneurs there who have been looking at the ag food sector for several years, and they are really, really quite impressive. They are looking at addressing some near-term issues from a climate perspective, where with the global warming, the kind of reduction in availability of groundwaters and fresh water, when they're looking at the available land for productivity, they are actually already adopting far faster the innovation that's required, both in terms of robotics for farming, all the way through to soil harnessing, to bee health, to kind of general food production. I think from a UK perspective, we need to be more effective in how we harness innovation. The work that we are doing across a number of institutions and universities around data management is impressive. We have put a lot of money and a lot of time from the UK public sector into that area. But more needs to be done there. How do we harness that data? How do we take that data and then turn it into something functional, which can be used by a farmer, by a food manufacturer, and by a citizen? I think big data management from a UK perspective is something which we need help on. We need to do more with around mapping food availability, waste availability, and driving that into how do you then take that data and make it purposeful. Similar, I think, with IoT and adapting technology to be used in a farming environment is really interesting. 5 years ago, Microsoft and a number of companies were looking at how can they use UAVs, remote sensors, sensors on farms, equipment, and use that to drive efficiencies in terms of equipment management, farm management, and productivity. But it was too early, certainly from a UK perspective. But the UK now, with its investment into 5G, as well as the 4G networks and the extension of those networks into more rural communities, is going to be really interesting, because it enables you to start looking at IoT devices, looking at the power that we have in our cell phones. So every farmer, every owner of a field who does something around food production invariably has a smartphone. That smartphone can be really harnessed for that individual to gather data from, sensors in fields, on machines, on cattle, looking into their poultry farms, into their sheds. They're looking at the environmental data that they're gathering. That data is pretty much sitting there, not doing anything. How do we use that data to provide information someone can use for decision making on how they deliver their day-to-day operations? Yeah,
and you touched on the 5G. So as a nation, we'll be rolling this out. And I know across the globe this is happening, or even, and I think you're 100% right. If you have a smartphone, you can do anything these days with the right applications. How do you think that the end users are open, or do you believe that the end users are open to adapt the technology, or do you think it's a mindset that as a group of innovators we have to try and help promote and help convert?
I think there's a little bit of help and conversion, but I think less so these days. I mean, everybody has a smartphone, whether it's an Apple or an Android. They're happy with apps as such. Everybody uses Twitter. There is a generation which probably is more resistant to that, but that generation still is actually engaged actively into it, just doesn't see it as necessarily being a business tool at this stage. I think the kind of, what's the phrase? Keep it simple. If you keep it simple, the apps that are the most successful, regardless of what they do, are the ones where the interface is really simple. It enables the user to get the data, to use it in the function that it's been designed for, and apply it. If it's too complicated, it has too many layers on the user interface, it's too many menus, too many options, then actually those are the apps that really struggle to get the uptake from the kind of the end user. Single-use applications at the start, and then build from that single use. So they start building capability around that core use. I think that's key. Trying to build an application that does too many things for too many people at the same time never really satisfies any single one. I think that's something to be avoided. And when we look at the investment that's going into IoT devices, into software platforms that are effectively harnessing and gathering data and harnessing that data from farm management systems, the interface is very simple and straightforward.
Yeah, perfect. And how do you feel? Because when we've sort of done our outreach within this industry sector, there is such a large crossover with different industry sectors as well. And I'm very much advocate to try and bring people from different industries to come and help tackle or overcome some problems that we may experience, and using this as an example, the AgriTech side. And you've mentioned the likes of Microsoft or IoT quite a bit. And you did also mention about the fintech sector, and that's just an example. That's, we just use that because there's a lot of IoT going into the climate change region, not just within fintech, not just within agriculture. How do you, as a collative group of individuals, because we do have multi-skilled people here from all different backgrounds, how would you advise that to promote the innovation, what we're trying to achieve through hackathons? How would you advise that these people go to their network, go out and actually try and pull more people in and attract them? Is there a magic little wand that we can use?
If only there was a magic wand. I think we'd use it quite a lot. I think it's don't believe there's a huge resistance to the kind of the translation of the expertise to this sector. I think there is an increasing awareness, certainly in the people coming out of university, going into their first stage of career. They are much more discerning as consumers. They want to buy products. They want to understand the kind of the environmental impact of their product that they buy and they invest into. They want to understand where where it comes from. I think also, not just from a user perspective, but businesses, certainly SMEs and kind of early stage businesses are maturing into large scale corporations with a understanding that their footprint, their individual and their collective footprint needs to be very, very mindful of their impact, their carbon footprint.
Yeah.
I think that touches on a whole range of different types of people, from the HR, from IT,
absolutely,
consultant, and a whole different collective of people. I don't think it's a hard sell. I think they also have to, I think if anything in your networks, if they reach out and say, you can make a difference, what you do in developing software platforms for HR services, for financial sector services, is directly transferable. That data science competency, that user interface, all of those expertise is what we are needing in this sector. And actually, there is a gap. If there's any message to go out of these networks, say, actually, in the ag food sector, there's a gap. That gap actually needs to be filled. That's quite an attractive place for recruiters to find people. Businesses who want to hire those people in are looking to pay. They recognize they need to match the salaries from the financial services sector. They need to pull those people out. So if I say, don't be blind to it, look at that sector and find the right companies to work for who are going to make a big change and who do need your expertise.
Fantastic. Okay, I've got let's have a look what we've got. We've just had a kind of a comment on here. It's a very impressive facility, and really interesting projects and initiatives that you're offering. And I think in terms of the questions, you have really covered exactly what we wanted. Exactly, you've answered anything that I was going to ask, because I think with that, the fact that you encourage the hackathons, you understand the value of this, and making that bridge between different sectors, and also making that bridge between your university students with experienced people, end users, and from different backgrounds. I think hackathons are a really good way of bringing these people together, and I think you've highlighted that. And I'm not sure if anybody else has got any questions, but in my mind, I thought it was excellent. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And if I'd mindful of the international community engaged over this weekend, I think one of the things I really am excited by is that international link. I mean, our senior scientists and principal scientists, they look after PhD programs globally. So from the Middle East to Asia to Indonesia to China to across Europe, as well as in the UK. That scientific community really does connect. I think we now need to layer onto that the technology community that really will harness those individuals' learnings.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Damien. Really appreciate this. Have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Yay. Thank you. Bye.